Bringer of Rain Boxing Talk here, folks. So the other day I posted a video talking about Errol Spence Jr. and his chances of winning the fight. And I mostly did that for the sake of objectivity. But one thing I wanted to just touch on here a little bit is I think Errol Spence's chances of winning the fight largely are predicated on the gas tank of Manny Pacquiao. Like, pretty much, I think if Pacquiao is able to ratchet up his stamina just a little bit more compared to his last fight, I think that's all he needs to have a good advantage in his fight with Spence. And I think he will definitely win the fight with Errol if he can just get his stamina up a little bit more, which I heard he's working on in training camp, so that might be a good sign. But anyway, I want to just make something abundantly clear here, folks, and I don't want people to overlook this because this is some valuable information that people, leading up to this fight, they need to know this, okay? And this might be the last post I make on here for a while, so I just want to say this straight up. I've done my due diligence, I've done my research, I've analyzed both situations, and not only do I think that Manny Pacquiao is the faster fighter when it comes to foot speed and hand speed, which will be a huge advantage, but I also happen to think he'll be the puncher in this fight against Errol Spence. Now, that might be controversial. Some people might be getting onto their keywords right now and typing up a storm here, calling me an idiot, whatever, etc. Look, folks, I know it might be somewhat of a controversial take here, but I've looked at the evidence here. The last few fights that Manny Pacquiao's been in compared to Spence's, and I really think that Manny Pacquiao is the harder hitter. And that could be huge playing into their fight because if Pacquiao is the faster man in the ring and can beat Spence to the punch, and if Pacquiao has a heavier punch when he gets there, Spence is really just kind of relying on his physical tools and his youth as pretty much the only ways that he could really win the fight. Because like I said, Spence's best chance is really predicated on Manny Pacquiao's gas tank being less than ideal. And I mean that bluntly, folks. Because if Pacquiao can come in with a little bit more juice, all he needs is a little bit more juice than what he had in the Thurman fight, because he's going to need it because Errol Spence fights at a high volume and a crazy work rate, and he's going to need to keep up with it. But if he can, then just look out, folks. Now, I want to just talk about the power for a little bit here. And I've looked at the past few fights Manny Pacquiao's had. And Keith Thurman, let's just say this. Keith Thurman was supposed to be the much heavier man, was supposed to be the physically stronger man. But when you look at the impact of the punches landed, Pacquiao's punch was way more impactful. Obviously he was able to drop Keith Thurman in the fight and was able to really, really hurt him in round 10 of their fight. And I think if Pacquiao was just able to get into a better punching angle and got off a couple more clean shots in the body, he could have knocked out Keith Thurman with body shots. I mean, that would have been incredible. And, Manny Pacquiao took a lot of shots from Keith Thurman, but he kind of ate those like candy, man. He just ate that shit. And I'm not really a big fan of seeing Pacquiao hit as much as he was, but Pacquiao was able to take those punches comparatively well. We saw Keith Thurman get dropped. We saw him get hurt really badly. We saw him get physically stunned multiple times in that fight. Manny Pacquiao was the puncher against Keith Thurman. Now, let me ask a crazy question here. Let me ask a stupid question here, okay? Are we sure that Errol Spence even hits harder than Keith Thurman? If Manny Pacquiao was the puncher against Keith Thurman, right, and Keith Thurman might hit harder than Errol Spence, why is it so crazy for me to suggest that Pacquiao is a puncher against Spence? Because people have called me insane for suggesting such a thing, folks. But I think it's an obvious question, whether or not Errol Spence can even hit harder than Keith Thurman. Because I've done some research. I've looked into both guys. And I actually think that Keith Thurman might hit harder than Errol Spence. And when I came to that conclusion, a lot of my fears around Errol Spence potentially knocking out Manny Pacquiao completely dissipated. I talked about in a video not too long ago that I was starting to get a gut feeling that Manny Pacquiao could knock out Errol Spence, and if a knockout were to occur, it would most likely be Manny Pacquiao. Now I'm doubling down on that statement here, guys. If a knockout is to happen, it's going to be via Manny Pacquiao. Errol Spence Jr. will not knock out Manny Pacquiao because he simply just doesn't hit harder than him. Pac-Man is the puncher. At 42 years of age, I know it's going to be a wild statement, but to me, it's just the truth. It's just the objective reality here. Furthermore, we'll look at some of the guys that Pacquiao has fought recently. Adrian Broner. I talked about it recently. We saw him basically get on his bicycle and run around the ring and was completely unwilling to engage with Manny Pacquiao during the duration of that fight. Adrian Broner has had a problem with his work rate in the past, throwing not a lot of punches. But in that fight against Manny Pacquiao, that was just a complete joke, man. He did jack shit in that fight, and quite frankly, his post-fight antics of claiming victory was some of the most pathetic displays I've seen from a professional boxer in my entire life. I mean, what the hell was that, man? And then, of course, Lucas Matisse. Wow. The man just got walloped in the ring. And Lucas used to be one of my favorites back in the day at 140. Was a really exciting fighter. But that basically stamped his ticket into retirement. And I've never seen Lucas Matisse just absolute destroyed like he was in there. Now, this was all coming after Manny Pacquiao, lost against Jeff Horn. And people are focusing on that fight too much, in my opinion. That fight was an anomaly. Don't look at that fight. That fight had some of the worst refereeing, the most dirty tactics I've ever seen employed by a fighter in my entire life. I gotta say, fuck the Jeff Horn fight. I still can't stand that guy for what he did to Pacquiao. The man robbed him and fought disgracefully. He disgraced the sport of boxing, Jeff Horn. And I hope we never see him again in the spotlight of boxing. Anyway, here, I got to wrap this up, folks. But I want to just make this very clear here. And to the Errol Spence fans, if you disagree with me, that's fine. You can let me know. But I've looked at the recent history of both guys, the fights that they've been in, and the reaction from the fighters that have faced them. And I think it's fair to say that not only does Manny Pacquiao have the hand speed and foot speed, he has the power, he has the punching advantage, and we'll see what Errol Spence can do. Because I think it's going to be a much tougher fight than what his fans anticipate. I know he's going to be the favorite going in there, but you have to ask yourself this question here, if you're going to bet on the fight. And if you believe Errol Spence is going to easily win. Is Errol Spence faster than Pacquiao? Does Errol Spence punch harder than Manny Pacquiao? If the answer to both of those questions is no, then what is his path to victory in this fight? I think that's the question we all have to ask ourselves. Anyway, that's just food for thought, folks. Bring Your Brain Boxing. Checking out.